Well, I investment from Bolton Capital. We ended up employing Schultz in Rogers as a partner, so obviously it wasn't too bad an experience. I think the key thing is, as Bren mentioned, it's just those small details, and not ultimately it comes down to not being greedy when it comes to the little points. So it was a successful exit. Don't try and get more than you're due. Just take what we're meant to get and close and be pro-founder.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd say is you can really tell a VC and investor when the going gets tough. You know, what are they like when the going gets tough? And that's, you know, I think so many people have seen VCs panic when the going gets tough, or immediately bound to try and fire the founder when that gets tough. You know, I'm not saying that there's never a moment where the founder is the wrong person, but I'm saying that having seen that actually there are lots of things, we have probably an unhealthy respect for founders. I'd say we both share that. And you know, and I think, and that isn't always, but that isn't always true of a VC.
I'd be interested to hear, Stefan, do you think that these guys, the pro-founders, have identified a problem that needs to be solved in Europe?
Yeah, first of all, it's absolutely fantastic and it's badly needed. And now, finally, in 2009, serial experienced entrepreneurs are starting backing young teams. And I'm being myself an entrepreneur and since a couple of years weirdly an investor. It is a difference whether you grow up in a business school and then have been worked in finance and then start to invest in companies, or whether you have spent most of your time in creating companies and leverage that knowledge. And it is one of the many stones we need actually to become more successful here in Europe.
Well, let's. Would anyone like to ask any questions or make any points about whether or not, you know, what your view is of startups and entrepreneurship in Europe right now? I'm going to give everyone an opportunity if you would like to have that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was interested in the hub that Stefan was talking about. In Europe, as we know, we're in so many different cultures, languages, and countries. Would you suggest centralizing that in one big hub, let's say London, for example? Or how do you see each company in each capital city of each country? How do you think that's gonna work? Like in Silicon Valley, everything's so close. How can we make that work in Europe?
So I actually see quite a concentration in the east part of London, be it the Clerkenwell area with a couple of companies, or be it Old Street, Silicon Roundabout. And you know, with Last.fm, so first of all, I'm not a co-founder of Last.fm. I would admire to be a good co-founder, but I'm not. I'm only have been for 2 years the chairman and still love the team. Other than that, what we did at Last.fm was fantastic because we did an international rollout to 12 languages within 6 weeks. And we actually did it by taking 12 interns from 12 countries and just placed them in one room, got some professional support from translation agencies, and literally 8 weeks later we had it up and running, which actually gave a pretty significant uptake in the traffic. And I'd like to just multiply and leverage these opportunities, and I'd think now here with pro-founders and other early stage active angels and venture capitalists, we do have a chance, because once again, I said this in the early days, for everyone, whether he's from Tallinn or whether he's from Prague or wherever in Europe, it is fantastically cheap moving over to London. It's just cheap, the first time ever. Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, imagine you're a Brit and you have to pay in the south of France £8 for a beer. That's tough. But it's actually quite nice if you're here from the continent and you get 2.260 to draft or whatever. So yeah, it turns out. So I'd say as well, looking at Oxford and Cambridge and other great universities here in Europe, as well tech universities, we do have a great chance, and I agree we should probably look more after Asia, because the real innovation is to be questionable whether it will still continue coming out of the valley.
I agree with that as someone who lives in the valley and doesn't want to see that happen. But, you know, I think I should raise one point because I don't remember which one of you guys it was that made the point about not doing sort of ripped off American ideas for startups. I think everywhere in the world needs to also not try to do a ripped off tech region from Silicon Valley. Whenever I see, even in the US, cities that, you know, talk a lot about having, you know, a tech scene, but really there's no critical mass there, versus cities that are very quiet about it, and actually there's a lot of cool things going on. It's always places that are trying to be Silicon Valley that wind up failing at it, because Silicon Valley is a unique place that was started by a unique set of circumstances, Fred Terman happening to live there, and then Fairchild spinning that, and then everything that came from that. If London wants to be more successful as a tech scene, don't even call it Silicon anything. Look at what London has that's endemically valuable, that Silicon Valley doesn't have, that Beijing doesn't have, whatever else. And, you know, maybe you can't get, you know, all around town quickly. Maybe you don't have 70-degree weather every day like we do in California. But there are a lot of advantages
It's actually tough to beat swinging London.
I'm sorry?
It's tough to beat swinging London.
And I think we'll all be hearing about how good we are at swinging, partying later.
Swinging? What? Swinging?
Partying, I meant. Tariq, I'm going to give you the final word.
About Europe and about the ability to deploy over Europe, I think if I take the first advice I would give to anyone is when I started NetTime and this new company, going global at first is a good thing. I mean, most of the time I see a lot of companies that say, well, let's start to be good in our country first, and then we'll see. And the problem is if you go with VCs and say, well, I'm going to be good in France or in the UK, you end up having to achieve at first pilot. And I think there's a lot of tools now available. We actually used user-generated translation for NetVital. We got available immediately, literally in tens of countries around the world. And I know Facebook has been doing the same thing now for expanding, so there's a lot of tools. But I think being international, going over just your own country and think global is a very interesting approach to have at start.
Well, with that, the breaking news, which you'll be reading about on TechCrunch shortly, by the way, due to a little post I'll be writing. Thank you very much to our panel.